They say that the walls of a house hold memories, but what about windows? Have you ever stopped to think about what they really reveal or hide? I've never been the superstitious type, until one day, looking out my window, I saw something that made me doubt my own sanity. A shadow, a face, something inhuman. Since then, I've never been the same. What if I told you that a simple window can be a portal to hell? It sounds like an exaggeration, I know, but this story, which began with a couple in love moving into the house across the street, will leave you afraid to look outside. And worse, afraid of being looked back. They say that the walls of a house hold memories. Today, I know that not only the walls, but also the doors and, mainly, the windows. It would be just a story if I hadn't seen it myself. It was an afternoon like any other. Sitting on my sofa, I watched the street, which used to be very quiet at that time of day. But unlike other afternoons, something caught my attention on the other side of the street. The old house that had been uninhabited for a long time. A couple standing at the gate watched the building with enthusiasm. They gestured, smiled, hugged each other. I immediately imagined that this would be the house they would soon live in. It would be good to see some life in that place. Soon, a real estate agent arrived, opened the gate, and took them inside. And that was when, at that exact moment, it all began. As soon as they entered the house and opened the living room window that faced the street, I could see perfectly through it. A shiver ran through my entire body. I could hardly believe what I was seeing. But it was there. Its appearance was unbelievable and frightening. Its body was tall and completely black, enveloped by a kind of smoke that surrounded it. Its face was not human. It looked a lot like a goat. Horns and eyes so red that they seemed to be bleeding. The window, when opened, seemed to have awakened that creature that immediately flew up to the roof and remained there, just watching the couple that seemed so happy. My eyes could not believe what they saw. It was not possible. I opened and closed my eyes several times, and the terrifying being remained perched on the roof. Before the house could be closed, the creature flew back in, and when the window was closed, through the glass, I could see its figure, attentively watching every step of the couple as they left, happily. How do you tell two strangers that you've just seen an evil entity in the house they're going to live in? At the very least, they'll call you crazy. So I kept quiet, hoping that it was all just an optical illusion. Every day, as soon as I got up, I opened the windows and inevitably looked at the one right across from mine. I started to feel calm when I no longer noticed anything strange. But that was only until the weekend, when the couple arrived with paints and brushes, excited as is typical of young people in love. It was beautiful to see, if that being wasn't watching them through the window again. They opened the whole house, but this time the creature didn't come out. She remained inside the house, and all day long, every time the girl appeared at the window, there was the entity stuck to her back like a shadow. What was that? It hadn't been long since I had moved in, only 5 years. But ever since I moved in, the house had always been empty, and I had never heard anyone talk about who had lived there or anything that might have happened in that property. With that thought fixed in my head, I looked outside once more, and the girl, standing at the window with that specter clinging to her, was watching me intently with her fixed and unmoving eyes. Soon, a macabre smile appeared at the corner of the girl's mouth, and, in a fit of terror, I closed the curtain. That day, I didn't go near my window again, only at night when I was forced to close it. The couple had already left. The house was now white, and the window had very clean glass. And standing on the other side was the entity. Bigger and with redder eyes, it showed itself through the glass. I looked away, closed my window, and swore not to open it again. But it was impossible to keep the windows of the house closed during a scorching summer. So I started to open them with my eyes closed, sit on the sofa far from the window, and avoid looking at the house when I had to go out. The couple finally moved in, and I began to notice that the boy's behavior was always the same, but the girl's changed depending on whether she was inside or outside the house. Outside, she would greet people, joke around, smile. And inside the house, she would stand for hours and hours at the window, watching with hatred the people passing by on the street. I could no longer see the entity, but I could feel that the woman was not alone. Her eyes, reflected in the window, were completely red. It wasn't long before the happy couple began to have disagreements. The arguments became more and more frequent, and the boy spent many nights away from home. I would hear arguments and mainly horrendous screams coming from that house. I had the impression that the boy was being ferociously attacked by her. That night, a rare occurrence, I woke up at exactly 3 in the morning with a terrible urge to go to the bathroom. I got up and went, but a reddish glow reflected in my window caught my attention. It looked like fire. Curious, I went to the window. I opened it very slowly and saw the girl, completely distraught and out of her mind, standing at the window. Around her, there was a kind of red flame, but it wasn't burning. She was tearing pieces of a black cat with her mouth. The animal's blood was dripping from its mouth while it struggled, still alive. I could not longer contain the scream that came out without my consent. I immediately lowered the curtain and stood still with my hand over my mouth, holding back another scream that insisted on wanting to come out. My stomach churned, and I ran to the bathroom. I couldn't stop vomiting. The cat's growls stopped, and the red glow disappeared. I couldn't get close to the window anymore, or even greet the girl, who I had met at the market that morning while buying bread. She was smiling and chatting happily with the cashier, as if nothing had happened. But I knew I had seen everything. On my way home, I met a lady who had lived in the neighborhood for many years. Already quite old, she knew everyone and would always stand at the gate talking and telling stories about her long life. I took the opportunity to ask about the house. The answer came along with a sign of the cross. Eleanor Whitman, that was the name of that sweet 88-year-old lady. She began to tell me that when she moved to the neighborhood, still young, at only 25 years old, there were few houses, but this one already existed. A family of 8 lived there, the mother, the father, and 6 children. No one knows for sure why, but the mother began to go crazy. Some said it was after she lost a baby, the only girl of 6 men. From then on, she began to behave strangely. She would stand at the window, watching everyone who passed by on the street. She would draw strange drawings around herself using animal blood. And one day, a kind of portal opened in that window. First, her husband was killed by her and sucked into the portal. Then, her children, one by one, disappeared. and she was left alone, completely crazy, inside that house. Until one day, she simply disappeared. The house remained empty for many years. Some families ended up invading the house a few years later, but they all had a tragic end or abandoned everything and left. That house was really abnormal, of that I was sure. But that story made me even more afraid. I was already thinking about putting a for sale sign on my gate. I no longer had peace. My days and nights were filled with anguish. The animals, which used to party in the street, began to disappear, and that window shone every dawn. A week after my conversation with Mrs. Eleanor, the girl's husband came home. I heard him park his car at the door and go in. I definitely didn't open my window anymore, but I couldn't help but hear it. And that night, I could clearly hear the screams of horror from that young man. He disappeared. Only his car remained at the door of the house, parked for several days, until his family came looking for news. While I was washing my sidewalk, I heard the woman say that he had left after an argument and hadn't come back. The police were called. They went in, searched the whole house, and nothing. No trace of the young man. He must have been sucked into the demonic portal, but how was I going to tell the police that? Time passed, and that woman's life now consisted of standing at that window all day and all night. She was no longer the same person. She was nowhere near the same as that beautiful, lively girl who had moved in with her lover to live a happy life. She was now just a ghost, and she wilted like a passion fruit every day. She looked a lot like that horrible being I saw when they moved in. No one could get her out of there. I remember her parents trying at all costs, but she wouldn't budge. I remember with terror that night of October 31st when I was woken up by desperate screams coming from across the street. That day, after a long time, I opened my window again. Through it, I could see something that to me was hell. Around the girl, there was a legion of demonic beings that tore her apart in the air as if tearing a chicken apart. She screamed desperately while pieces of her flesh were devoured. A red fire surrounded that entire window, and suddenly, like a typhoon of fire, it was sucked in and everything disappeared. Even if I live for 300 years, I will never forget this scene. Never. There were nights and nights without being able to sleep. My peace only began to return when I woke up one day with a demolition company parked in front of the house. Finally, the nightmare was going to end. The house was going to be destroyed, and a building was going to be built in its place. I went back to watching the work through my window. It was satisfying to see every piece of that horror being knocked down. But believe it or not, everything was twisted, except the window, which remained intact on the ground. Not a single pane of glass was broken, as if no tractor had hit it. I saw it being taken to a scrapyard, and I could still see in its glass the reflection of that evil being with red eyes looking back. I don't know who the unfortunate person was who bought that window from the scrapyard. Maybe it was you. Do you really want to watch through the window? Many years have passed, and I see some stories on the internet about people who mysteriously disappeared inside their homes without a trace. It seems like something fantastic or some kind of urban legend that spreads. But I know the truth. It's not just an urban legend. One thing I'm sure of, I'll never be able to look at a window the same way again. Be careful. Always be very careful around windows. They can actually be portals to hell.